The excavator's steel teeth bit into the concrete as Sarah Mitchell watched her 15-year-old pool disappear forever. But when the last chunk of concrete was hauled away, revealing what lay buried beneath, the entire neighborhood erupted in screams. What they found wasn't just shocking, it was impossible. And it would tear apart everything Sarah thought she knew about the house she'd called home for 2 decades. Sarah Mitchell stood in her backyard, arms crossed tightly against the October. Chill. Watching as the excavator operator positioned his machine over what had been her family's swimming pool for the past 15 years. The morning mist clung to the skeletal remains of the pool's framework, making the whole scene feel like something from a graveyard. "You sure about this, Mrs. Mitchell?" Danny Kozlowski called down from the excavator's cab, his weathered face creased with concern. "That's a lot of good concrete you're asking me to tear up." Sarah nodded firmly, though her stomach churned with doubt. "It has to go, Danny. The maintenance costs are killing me, and with Emma off to college..." She trailed off, not wanting to admit the real reason, that every time she looked at the pool, she saw her husband Mark's face the day before the accident, laughing as he cannonballed into the deep end with their daughter. "Your call," Danny shrugged, revving the engine. "But don't blame me when you regret it, come summer." The first impact sent a shockwave through the ground. Sarah felt it in her bones as the excavator's steel claw punched through the pool's concrete shell with a sound like thunder. Chunks of white concrete tumbled into the deep end, and Sarah had to look away. "What the hell is that racket?" Sarah turned to see her neighbor, Patricia Hendricks, marching across the lawn in her pristine white robe and slippers, her silver hair still in curlers. Patricia's face was twisted in the familiar expression of righteous indignation that had terrorized the Maple Street Homeowners Association for the past decade. "I'm having my pool removed," Sarah said evenly, though her pulse quickened. Patricia had a talent for turning simple conversations into neighborhood wars. Without consulting. "The HOA?" Patricia's voice climbed an octave. "This is a major property modification, Sarah. There are procedures, forms, a waiting period for community input." "It's my property, Patricia." Sarah turned back to watch Danny work, hoping to end the conversation before it escalated. But Patricia wasn't finished. "Your property, yes, but our property values. Do you have any idea what removing an in-ground pool does to neighborhood desirability? I should report this to the county." The excavator's engine roared louder as Danny attacked the pool's shallow end, drowning out Sarah's response. More neighbors began to emerge from their houses, Jim and Carol from next door, the new couple with the twin toddlers from across the street, old Mr. Peterson walking his ancient beagle. "Noise ordinance violation," Patricia announced to the growing crowd, her voice carrying over the machinery. 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning, completely unacceptable. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. The city noise ordinance allows construction starting at 7 a.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. on weekends. It's 8:15. "Don't quote regulations at me, young lady." Patricia stepped closer, and Sarah caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with morning breath. "I've been protecting this neighborhood's integrity since before you moved in. This kind of reckless destruction." "Reckless?" Sarah's composure finally cracked. "My husband built that pool with his own hands, every tile, every fitting. Do you think this is easy for me?" The crowd fell silent except for the excavator's steady rhythm. Sarah immediately regretted revealing so much, but Patricia's eyes had already lit up with predatory interest. "Oh, how tragic," Patricia said with poisonous sympathy. "But personal grief doesn't excuse community obligations. Mark would have understood proper procedure." "Don't." Sarah's voice went deadly quiet. "Don't you dare use his name." Danny shut off the excavator, sensing the tension. In the sudden silence, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat and the distant sound of children playing several streets over. The normal sounds of a Saturday morning in suburbia, while her world felt like it was cracking apart. Ladies," Jim Romano intervened, stepping between them with his hands raised. "Let's all take a breath here. Sarah, you doing okay with all this?" Sarah nodded gratefully. Jim had been Mark's best friend, the one who'd helped carry the casket 2 years ago. "Just trying to move forward, you know." Course you are. Jim shot Patricia a warning look. And Patricia, maybe this isn't the time for HOA business. Patricia's face flushed red. The HOA exists for everyone's protection. Rules aren't suggestions, Jim. They're what separate us from living in chaos. Oh, shut up, Patricia. The voice came from Carol Romano, Jim's usually soft-spoken wife. Everyone turned in surprise. Sarah's been through enough without you vulturing around looking for violations. Excuse me? Patricia drew herself up to her full height, which still left her several inches shorter than Carol. I'll have you know. You'll have us know you're a miserable old bat who gets her kicks from making other people's lives harder, Carol continued, her voice gaining strength. Some of us remember when you tried to find the Johnsons for their son's playground equipment. A dying child, Patricia. You wanted to find them for making their dying child happy. The crowd murmured uncomfortably. Sarah remembered that incident. 8-year-old Tommy Johnson with leukemia, and his parents installing a swing set that was allegedly 3 inches too close to the property line. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That was completely different. Safety. Regulations exist for you to feel powerful, Carol finished. Well, here's some power for you. Leave Sarah alone, or you'll answer to every decent person on this street. Danny cleared his throat loudly. Ladies, I hate to interrupt, but I need to know if we're continuing here. Clock's ticking, and I've got another job at noon. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her, some supportive, others curious. Patricia's twisted with fury. Keep going, Danny. Tear it all out. The excavator roared back to life, and Danny resumed his methodical destruction. Sarah watched chunks of concrete pile up like broken teeth, each piece representing a memory she was choosing to bury. Emma's first swimming lessons, Mark's terrible cannonballs, pool parties that went until midnight, filled with laughter and music and the kind of happiness that felt permanent. This is far from over, Patricia hissed in Sarah's ear before stalking back toward her house. But Sarah barely heard her. Something had caught her attention in the excavator's latest bite, a flash of color that didn't belong, something that had been buried beneath the pool's concrete foundation for 15 years. Danny, she called, waving her arms. Danny, stop! The operator killed the engine and leaned out of his cab. Problem? Sarah pointed to the freshly broken concrete. There, partially exposed in the dark earth beneath the pool's foundation, was what looked like bright yellow fabric. And something else. Something white and curved that made her stomach lurch with recognition. What is it? Jim asked, following her gaze. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Because unless she was losing her mind, that white curved object looked exactly like a human skull. Jesus Christ, Danny whispered, climbing down from his excavator. Mrs. Mitchell, I think you better call the police. The gathering crowd pressed closer, and Sarah heard someone gasp. Patricia, who had been halfway to her house, turned back with sharp interest. What's all the commotion? She demanded, pushing through the group. When she saw what they were all staring at, her face went white as the bone gleaming in the dark soil. Nobody move, Jim ordered, his voice carrying the authority of his 20 years in the military. This is a crime scene. Now, Sarah fumbled for her phone with trembling hands, but her mind was racing faster than her fingers. Mark had poured that concrete foundation himself, working alone on the weekends while she took Emma to her grandmother's. He'd been so particular about it, so secretive about the process, said he wanted to surprise them with his craftsmanship. The phone shook in her grip as she dialed 911. As she waited for the operator to answer, one terrible thought kept cycling through her mind. If there was a body buried under their pool, Mark had known about it. And if Mark had known about it, then everything she thought she knew about her husband, about her life, was a lie. Behind her, Patricia's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Well, Sarah Mitchell, looks like your little demolition project just solved a very old mystery. But as the 911 operator's voice crackled through the phone, Sarah realized Patricia was wrong. This wasn't solving a mystery. This was creating one that would destroy everything she had left. Detective Ray Martinez had seen plenty of crime scenes in his 22 years on the force, but finding human remains under a suburban swimming pool was a first. He crouched beside the exposed grave, careful not to disturb the yellow fabric that the medical examiner was photographing from every angle. "How long you figure it's been down there?" his partner, Detective Lisa Chen, asked as she finished interviewing the excavator operator. "Concrete looks about 15 years old, maybe more," Martinez replied, studying the foundation's edges. "We'll know more when the ME gets the bones to the lab." Sarah sat on her back porch steps, wrapped in a blanket despite the afternoon sun, watching the controlled chaos of the investigation. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze, transforming her backyard into something alien and threatening. Neighbors pressed against the barriers, their faces hungry with curiosity and whisper-fueled speculation. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Detective Chen approached with her notepad ready. "I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions about when the pool was installed." Sarah nodded mechanically. She'd been dreading this moment for the past 4 hours, ever since the medical examiner confirmed what everyone could see. The bones were human, and they'd been buried before the concrete was poured. "It was summer of 2010, Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "Mark, my husband, he insisted on doing the foundation work himself, said he wanted it done right." "Did he work alone?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah felt the weight of everyone's attention, the detectives, the crime scene technicians, and especially Patricia Hendricks, who had somehow positioned herself close enough to overhear despite the police barriers. Mostly, yes, he was very particular about his projects. Detective Chen scribbled notes. "Did your husband ever mention finding anything unusual while excavating? Old utilities, debris, anything like that?" "No, nothing." Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. "He just said the ground was harder to dig than he expected. Took him longer than planned." "How much longer?" "He thought it would take 2 weekends. It took nearly a month." The detectives exchanged glances. Martinez joined them, peeling off his latex gloves. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're going to need to search your house. With your permission, of course, but—" "You have it," Sarah said quickly. "Search whatever you need to search." "Sarah!" Patricia's voice carried over the crime scene tape. "Sarah, don't you think you should call a lawyer first?" Everyone turned to stare at Patricia, who had managed to work her way to the front of the crowd. Her face was flushed with excitement, eyes bright with malicious glee. "I'm sorry," Detective Martinez said. "And you are?" "Patricia Hendricks, HOA president and concerned neighbor." She drew herself up importantly. "I just think Sarah should be careful about waiving her rights, especially given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Detective Chen asked sharply. Patricia's smile was venomous. "Well, Detective, there are things about Mark Mitchell that not everyone in this neighborhood chose to overlook." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Patricia, don't—" "Such as?" Martinez prompted. "His temper, for one thing." Patricia's voice carried clearly across the yard, ensuring every neighbor could hear. "The fights, the late-night shouting matches, and then there was that incident with Rebecca Torres." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. She hadn't heard it spoken, aloud in 15 years, but it still had the power to stop her heart. "Who is Rebecca Torres?" Detective Chen asked. Patricia opened her mouth to continue, but Sarah found her voice first. She was Mark's ex-girlfriend, from before we got married." "And?" Sarah looked around at the faces staring at her. Neighbors she'd known for years, now looking at her like she was a stranger. "She disappeared in 2009, right before Mark and I got engaged." The backyard fell silent except for the rustle of the crime scene tape and the distant hum of the medical examiner's equipment. Detective Martinez stepped closer to Sarah, his expression grave. "Mrs. Mitchell, I think we need to continue this conversation down at the station." "Am I under arrest?" "No, ma'am, but I think it would be better if we talked somewhere more private." Sarah nodded, but as she stood to follow the detective, Patricia's voice rang out one more time. "You might want to ask her about the insurance money too, Detective. Amazing how convenient it was that Mark died in that car accident just when people were starting to ask questions about Rebecca again." This time, the crowd's murmur was audible, a sound like wasps buzzing. Sarah felt their stares like physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders. "That's enough," Detective Chen said sharply, but the damage was done. In 2 sentences, Patricia had transformed Sarah from grieving widow to potential accomplice. At the police station, Sarah sat in an interview room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. The fluorescent lights made everything look sickly yellow, including her own hands folded on the metal table. "Let's start with Rebecca Torres," Detective Martinez said, settling into the chair across from her. "What can you tell us about her relationship with your husband?" Sarah took a shaky breath. They dated for about 2 years. It was intense, volatile. Rebecca was beautiful, but she had problems. Drinking, mostly. And she was jealous. Obsessive. Obsessive how? She couldn't accept that it was over. She'd show up at Mark's work, call his house at all hours, follow him when he went out. It got scary. Detective Chen leaned forward. Scary enough that he might have done something about it? No. Sarah's voice was firm. Mark would never hurt anyone. He was gentle, patient. Even with Rebecca's stalking, he just wanted her to get help. But she disappeared right before your engagement, Martinez pointed out. That's quite a coincidence. Sarah felt trapped, like the walls were closing in. The police investigated. They questioned Mark, questioned me. Rebecca had a history of disappearing. She'd done it before, usually when she was drinking. Heavily. Everyone assumed she'd left town. Everyone except her sister, Maria. She never believed Rebecca would just leave without saying goodbye. She kept calling the police, filing missing person reports, but there was no evidence of foul play. The room fell silent. Sarah could hear the clock on the wall ticking, marking the seconds of her life falling apart. "Mrs. Mitchell," Detective Chen said gently, "we found something else in the grave. Besides the bones..." Sarah's heart stopped. "What?" "A ring. A diamond engagement ring." Chen pulled out an evidence bag containing a small, delicate ring with a solitaire diamond. "Do you recognize this?" Sarah stared at the ring, and the last 15 years of her life crumbled around her. Because she did recognize it. She'd seen it on Rebecca Torres's finger in dozens of photos the woman had sent to Mark's phone, begging him to take her back. "It's Rebecca's," she whispered. The detectives exchanged another look. Martinez leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah's face. "Mrs. Mitchell, I have to ask, did you know your husband killed Rebecca Torres?" "No." The word came out as a sob. "I swear to you, I had no idea. I thought she'd just left town. Mark told me she'd finally accepted it was over and moved away." "And you believed him?" Sarah looked up at them through her tears. "He was my husband, the father of my child. We built a life together. Of course I believed him." But even as she said it, memories were surfacing, troubling details she'd pushed aside at the time. Mark's insistence on doing the pool work alone, the way he'd come home those weekends covered in dirt and exhaustion that seemed to go beyond physical labor. How he'd jumped every time the phone rang for months after Rebecca's disappearance. "I need to see the body," Sarah said suddenly. Both detectives looked surprised. "Ma'am, I don't think..." "I need to see her. I need to know for sure." An hour later, Sarah stood in the morgue, staring down at bones laid out on a steel table. The medical examiner, Dr. Sarah Patel, pointed to various features. Female, approximately 25 to 30 years old. Height about 5'6". The yellow fabric appears to be part of a dress. Silk, expensive. And here, she indicated the skull. Blunt force trauma to the back of the head. This is what killed her. Sarah gripped the table's edge to keep from falling. Rebecca had been wearing a yellow silk dress the last time anyone saw her alive, at a restaurant where she'd confronted Mark and Sarah during their engagement dinner, screaming that Sarah was stealing her life. "There's something else," Dr. Patel continued. "Based on the bone density and some other factors, I can give you a pretty precise timeline for when she died." This woman was killed in late June or early July 2009. The room spun around Sarah. June 2009. The same month Mark had proposed. The same month he'd started acting strange, jumpy, distant. The same month he'd suddenly decided they needed to install a swimming pool in their backyard. Detective Martinez appeared at her elbow. "Mrs. Mitchell? You okay?" Sarah looked up at him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something besides grief and confusion. She felt anger. White-hot, burning rage at the man she'd loved and trusted and mourned. "My daughter," she whispered. "Emma was 8 when we installed that pool. She learned to swim in it. She had birthday parties there. We've been living on top of a grave for 15 years. The magnitude of Mark's betrayal hit her like a physical force. He hadn't just killed Rebecca Torres. He'd buried her beneath their family's sanctuary.